At Cabinet, we've just approved the draft of the local plan to be taken forward to go to full council next week. Wiltshire's local plan is a document that sets out how we are going to meet the housing targets set for us by government over the course of the next 15 years. This local plan, it's critical in my view that we get it out now, early. The new government are consulting on a new version of the National Planning Policy Framework that will significantly increase housing targets in the UK and by 81% in Wiltshire. If this local plan is in with the inspector inside the next couple of months, then that's what will be considered, and that's what will become the de facto plan for the next 5 years. Otherwise, we have got to start again and develop a new plan with 81% more housing in it. Not something I want to see done. We've had a huge response to this plan, over 10,000 consultation responses. It's taken a lot of time for us to go through them, to look at the details. Many of those consultation responses will simply be passed on to the inspector. There were 2 sites that have been taken out of the plan as a result of the consultation process because in light of that, they're no longer available. But this now goes, assuming full council passes it next week, to the inspectorate, who will then hold a public inquiry and will reach their conclusion at some point next year. We've just approved a new enforcement policy. I think this is a really important issue for Wiltshire Council, and it's something that in the past we have not been as strong with as I would have liked. When I became leader, I asked that we start taking a much more robust approach to enforcement of things like fly tipping, like littering, trading standards issues, planning enforcement, where planning people have done something that goes against planning permission. I think it's really important for a number of reasons that we do this. Firstly, with fly tipping, we've seen a reduction of about 40% in the amount of fly tipping since we have been taking a much more robust approach in fining people and making sure that people don't get away with it. But if you take the bigger picture and if you look at some of the more complex enforcement cases we get, they can involve many different parts of Wiltshire Council. They may start with a planning issue, but then involve public health, public protection, involve the safety of young people. So they can be really complex issues. So this new policy brings all of the existing policies together. We have a new group inside the council who are looking at enforcement, and particularly enforcement of these complex cases. Again, this is going on next week to full council for ratification, but I think is a step change in embedding that way that we are going to deal with enforcement issues moving forward. This isn't about penalising people, this is about safety, and it's about making sure we're doing everything we can to ensure the safety of the public. Cabinet have just agreed a 3-year extension to our CAMS service, our provision of mental health services for children and young people in Wiltshire. This provision of this service, it's been under an awful lot of strain, particularly post-COVID, and whilst we have an existing contract that we're proposing on extending, and whilst during this extension process we will look at then how we recommission it, the contract in our assessment is working well at the moment. It's far more effective from our perspective to make sure that this continues whilst we take a chance alongside the Integrated Care Board, because this kind of mental health provision isn't something we do in isolation. It's done alongside the NHS and their provision for other for adults as well as children, and just to make sure that we have that time to really look at what that future delivery should be like. We've had the confirmation of the latest tranche of funding from government for the Household Support Fund. This was set up by the last government to provide funding, particularly during the inflation shock, the energy shock that we had when Russia invaded Ukraine, to provide support for families that were really struggling and needed that extra assistance, that extra benefit. It's had a frustrating history in some ways, in that we keep getting 6-month extensions to the programme. And it can be a little challenging from our side to deliver a long-term strategic programme when we're only getting into 6-month tranches. We've got a further tranche, which is great. We will continue to make sure that work is going on. We're particularly using that to support, for example, vulnerable families during school holidays, where that the additional support enables us to make sure that we are running clubs putting facilities in place to provide lunches, for example, to some of those children, but also other vulnerable groups. One that's been quite notable and challenging from the perspective of other government funding has been travellers and the boater community, people who are essentially living off grid. And again, that's one of the areas where we're trying to make sure we are channeling that support where we know there's vulnerability, but we need to use this money to provide that more targeted support in a very Wiltshire specific way. We've approved the Chippenham One Plan. Now, for those who aren't familiar, and I'd be very surprised if you were, this is a plan that's been pulled together by something called the Chippenham Place Board, and it looks at what projects, what opportunities there are in the centre of Chippenham to improve it, to make it a better place to be, a place that the public want to be spending more time, to basically enhance Chippenham Town Centre and help ensure its future in a new world where going to a town centre isn't just about shopping, but it's about the experience, it's about enjoying yourself, it's about culture and leisure all blended together with retail. The plan doesn't say what we are definitively going to do. It identifies a series of projects that are then ready when other funding sources come along for us to then pick that project up and say, right, we can deliver this. We've used a similar plan in Salisbury to great effect, for example, with the River Park project, which is almost complete now. And equally for some of the work around Fisherton Street in Salisbury. With Chippenham, there is a similar programme to the River Park project that we are now, or the Environment Agency is working up and we're assisting them with. The reason for that is that the existing, essentially the existing flood defences in Chippenham are at a point where they need updating. There is a radial gate that is designed to keep the water levels high, but in case of flooding, it's designed to open pretty much automatically. Earlier this year, we got to the point where it had been blocked by a tree, and the Environment Agency came within hours of actually blowing it up to prevent flooding in Chippenham. So they need to replace that. As a result of that, we have been working with them and through the Chippenham One Plan and through consultation with the public to try and understand what we can do to not just get the flood, in this case the gate removed, but to look at creating a better environment, to finding additional funding sources to bring in to do something that makes the entire stretch of river in the middle of Chippenham more attractive, more accessible, something that the public are wanting to spend more time by and therefore enjoying themselves when they're in town, giving them a reason to go in there that isn't just about shopping.